I'm just going to get right into the concepts today because I want to break down this idea of nirvana or contextualize it for you so that it becomes more meaningful as an experience. And I'm going to get into quite a lot of a diverse array of concepts that come from different sources to help give nirvana as an effort, as an action, more meaning. And so the first thing I wanted to reference is the Bhagavad Gita. And so the Bhagavad Gita is essentially like the Hindu Bible. It was written in 400 BC, and it's the story of a warrior prince who sort of works to reclaim his birthright, which is his kingdom. And the story takes place on a battlefield in which he has to fight, defend his sort of destiny, and fight the very kingdom he loves and works to protect, because they are under the rule of sort of like a totalitarian dictator, but they are loyal to their new king, and in that they defend the kingdom and its unrightful ruler from the rightful king. And Arjuna, as the rightful king, is the hero, is confronted with this. Among many things, he's confronted with a problem of fighting through his family and his past friends to reclaim what is his and sort of make the sacrifice for the greater good. And he is advised by Krishna, who is an avatar of the god Vishnu, one of the main three Hindu gods. Vishnu is the preserver, who is responsible for sort of preserving, not creating and not destroying. A little bit too much info, but what I wanted to get into is where this battle takes place. And it takes place in a certain field, or a kshetra, of dharma and kuru. And so dharma is purpose, and kuru is sort of this verb that means to do or to enact. And so what it means is, as all of us pursue our heroic journey, and that's just sort of like our best life, right? That's what that means. It takes place in a very certain position within our psyches. Purpose. We have to recognize what our purpose is. We can't work aimlessly towards other people's purpose. That doesn't fulfill us. And it also must work, we must sort of arrive at the field of kuru. We must arrive at the field of effort. And so this is, the slogan of Nike, just do it. And Krishna advised Arjuna to do the same thing. You must arrive at kuru kshetra. You must arrive at the field of effort and purpose. So dharma and kuru. But what is that purpose? And so the next topic I wanted to get into, there is a yogi called Sri Aurobindo, and he's a unique sort of character. He looks specifically into pain and worked a lot with physical pain, and found that in pain there is the experience of bliss. He, contrary to Gandhi, was willing to sort of utilize violence to liberate India from Britain as a younger man. He studied in Europe as a young man, so he's sort of like a Western educated, highly educated person. And as he sort of became more and more committed to the social standing of India, he stumbled upon yoga and spirituality, and upon realizing its deeper nature, abandoned everything, abandoned his career as a philosopher, abandoned his sort of role in liberating India, and just committed himself to the spiritual path. And so he's a really interesting example of what yoga really represents. And I started reading some of his work this past week, and he speaks a lot about the essence, the karma, the purpose of your practice. Why are you really doing this? And that it cannot involve, he underlines constantly for the first chapter of the book, that it cannot involve any sort of personal means or motivations. We can't do this to become better people, or how he puts it, super people, supermen. That we have to do this to recognize the divine, and that any other purpose is only going to create or delay the onset of pain, or sort of make the end goal of yoga or the end goal of meditation never actually arise. And so just taking the time to consider, am I trying to transcend myself, or am I trying to build myself up? And transcendence, right, can sound pretentious, right? It's like, who am I, who are any of us to transcend what we are and what all other people seem to be working for, but there's no real egoism in that. And for me, I approach this idea of transcendence more as exploration, that there are territories in which we all occupy as a culture, operations or motives that we all seem to work through, and that this idea of spiritual transcendence is simply saying that maybe there's another way to exist within ourselves or to sort of recognize ourselves, and if we are willing to spend some time every day working in a new direction, that in itself is transcendence. And what we are fundamentally trying to transcend is our mind. So Sri Aurobindo is just an interesting character that really pushes this hard. You must work your practice to approach what he calls the divine, but what can also be sort of coined as nirvana. And so nirvana is the extinguishing or the blowing out of self. That is the transcendence. We're not trying to build our intellect by understanding these philosophies. We're trying to understand our mind, which happens through these philosophies, to eventually see what is beyond them. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is the biological evidence for what's going on when we meditate. And so when our minds are wandering, they go into a default mode, and this is called the default mode network. In the left hemisphere of the brain, certain sections of the brain work to pretty much develop our own theories of mind, which means that when we look at each other, we have a screen of faces right now, you're looking at me, your brain is working to understand, who am I, who are these people, what are their motivations, what is their story, and we're sort of deciphering the mystery of each other all the time. We are also doing that with ourselves, and that involves our brains constantly scanning our memories and scanning our intellect. And we sort of got into this in previous sessions, but this is a default mode. So when we're not focused on anything, which is fairly often, our brains are working to contextualize reality. And that fosters assumptions and narrows our field of understanding, actually. When we are in a task-oriented mode, the default mode shuts off and we stop developing our own theories of life. We stop considering ourselves. We stop ruminating on the past. And for this, when yogis would focus intensely in their meditation, essentially in a biological way, their own being started to dissolve, right? Because their brains were not processing themselves and developing more theories of mind and theories of self. So this is where nirvana exists on a biological level. It exists in what is called the task-oriented network, which is very different than the default mode network. And yogis just learn to leverage this natural part of our psyche and these natural cycles of the brain to experience transcendent levels of bliss, but that bliss hinges on the literal forgetting of self. And so it's sort of counterintuitive. The last remarks of the Buddha were to remember, but if we expand upon that, it is remember to forget yourself. That is sort of what's going on. And that there's a biological sort of, mechanism in that. So that's all I wanted to say. Bhagavad Gita, you must arrive at the field of purpose, which is to forget yourself, and the field of action. You must actually try to forget yourself. How do we do that? By activating the task-oriented network, by focusing, which is the same story said over and over and over again by all meditative teachers. Sri Aurobindo really just sort of, I'm highlighting him as a resource for you to sort of appreciate, are you doing this to become a better person of yourself, better version of yourself, which seems noble and seems worthwhile, but in terms of the practice, at least while you're meditating, that cannot be a motivation, or else you're going to encourage, even in the slightest way, this considering of like who you are, what you want, where you think you're going, the utility of meditation, and that's going to suspend your actual practice in the long run. And so we have to do this to transcend ourselves, and that transcendence is not a pretentious word. It just means to move in a different direction. And then the last thing, again, is nirvana. So we're going to consolidate all of these ideas, even though I just brushed through them, through the word nirvana. And while we meditate today, I just want you to consider from time to time the word nirvana and understand it means literally to blow out. And what are you blowing out? The self and your own theories of mind and your own theories of success. So that's what we're going to get into today. And then just sort of organizing this all into what we've been working on previously. The kleshas or the koshas or the sheaths of the human being, We got into the body a couple weeks ago. I am not this body, but I have this body. We got into the energy of the body a couple weeks ago, and this was pranamaya kosha. We were just feeling the way our bodies move, which is really what we always work towards. The next sheath in, right, because it moves from gross to subtle, external to internal, is the mind, manomaya kosha. And this is the opportunity of transcendence. And in a very literal way, this is where Arjuna, as the warrior prince, or we as the heroes of our own stories, have this opportunity to pivot and take an unnatural direction, the road least traveled, which is beyond the intellect. Cool. So I'll keep it at that for the opening remarks, and let's get into our practice. Comfortable seated position. And I'll just let you build your practice at this point. If you're new, forgive me, but just be still, breathe deeply. Those that have been here, go through the 4 fundamentals and really construct your own experience. All right, we have some time. So let's spend about 4 minutes here building your own practice. Those that are new, just be still. Don't move and see where that takes you. The beauty of this practice is what it does to us over time. And just because while we practice, at our best, we attempt to avoid our intentions and our purposes, we are not trying to become greater than what we are, it does not mean that we will not become greater than what we are. It's just a consequence. And so because you've sat down, assumed stillness, assumed a strong posture, and started to control your breath, even if there is distraction, even if there are expectations lingering in the thought process, you have arrived at Dharmakashetra, the field of purpose, and Kurukashetra, the field of action. It's a rendezvous point. So take the time right now to impose the story of Arjuna, the warrior prince, onto yourself. consider that within you there is a tapestry of archetypes that are as real as your own identity. And as Arjuna rolls up in his chariot, preparing to do what must be done, here you are at the very same experience. Your body is the chariot, pulled by the senses, occupied by a driver, occupied by a hero, occupied by divinity. Slow down your breath. And so to test your sentience, to test your consciousness, work to construct this idea of arrival. Work to feel this concept of achievement with greater intensity through sheer will. If you can't, your inability to recognize you've arrived, your inability to construct this experience of meaning suggests you are not as in control as you think you are. And if you can erect meaning and feel this moment as a fated rendezvous, then you are building an experience of satisfaction for yourself, and that in itself is rewarding. Slow down the breath. Moving quickly, we pull ourselves to this rendezvous point, stillness and internalization, not to become better, but to transcend ourselves, and in simpler terms, to forget ourselves. The way we biologically forget ourselves is by implementing intense focus on a specific task. Focus on tingling sensation wherever it naturally arises in your body. Face, arms, chest, belly, feet, scalp. And for the entirety of the meditation today, stay fixated on that specific point. This is the task-oriented network. This is where the potential of forgetting ourselves is possible. And in that, the potential of transcendence. When you get distracted, recognize it is the mind that distracts you. Specifically, the default mode network, which is preoccupied with your own theories of mind, your own theories of self, preoccupied with memories and your narrative. Notice that you are what you are distracted by, your own story, your own concepts. You are the thing to blow out. You are the thing to extinguish while meditating. Once you're ready to refocus on the tingling sensations, repeat the mantra, Waheguru, praise the teacher, celebrate you're learning something, Waheguru, and then repeat the word Nirvana. The lesson is Nirvana. The lesson is to remember we must forget ourselves. Let's take a deep breath in. Very slow exhale. Waheguru, Nirvana. Praise the teacher for reminding me to forget myself. The teacher is this practice. Notice you're entangled in the mind. And the mind is a dynamic landscape. Appreciate that this process is about transcending that landscape of memories, expectations, fears, intellect, theories of self, theories of others. The more willing you are to focus on a singular sensation, the more that mind disappears, the more you metaphorically transcend. Slow down the breath. That is always the better choice. The better choice in Sanskrit is called Shreya. Waheguru, Nirvana. As we disappear, the intensity in which we grip onto the world lessens. Notice the body is just there, sitting in its own stillness, managing itself. Your lungs are breathing automatically. The sensations you're focusing on that are more than likely euphoric are occurring on their own. Reality is managing itself. And there's a peace in that. This piece is unique because it doesn't come from consuming anything. It doesn't come from adjusting anything. But your innermost reality. The world at large is left as it is. It is a unique effort, a unique purpose, a unique work. So just take about 3 more breaths, very slow. Again, that is Shreya. That is the powerful choice in regards to breathing. Slow and steady. And try to sense all of this. This is purposeful. This is action. Through focus, we transcend the mind. We experience nirvana, not the finger pointing to nirvana. Now, as slowly as you're breathing, bring your hands to heart center. And again, consider this idea of a rendezvous, the field of purpose and the field of effort. And as slowly as you are breathing, breathe twice as slow. Just think nirvana, blowing out the self. But the body is still there because the body is not us. The aliveness of the body is still there because that aliveness is not us. Our identity and our narrative still exist within the mind, but we are not the mind. And so this practice allows us to experience something other than the psyche, which is where most human beings are entangled. The mind is Maya. And lift your thumb knuckles to third eye center. And just repeat, Wahe Guru. Celebrate that there is a lesson here. Wahe Guru. Praise the teacher. Praise the remover of darkness. Nirvana. I remember forgetting myself intentionally. Forgetting myself for a higher purpose is a valuable yet unordinary passion that provides unique fruit, special insight, and unique balance. So again, feel all of this. My words are only fingers. Contentment, peace, gratitude, hope. The virtues, the gemstones of the human spirit, they start to glow. Let's take one more breath in. Wahe Guru Nirvana, one more exhale. Release your wrists to your knees. You're still meditating. Tall spine. Appreciate this meditative mind, a transcendent mind. And as you open your eyes, just feel it blow away. As the default mode kicks on, we're no longer focusing on anything specifically. And immediately our own theories of mind, theories of others, and theories of self kick back in, and we feel that reemergence. All right. Good work, everybody. As always, it's so important to work to experience these states of mind in real life. It's akin to like learning to dream lucidly, to realize that you are dreaming while you're dreaming. The second that happens in a dream, the possibilities of what exists in a dream become accessible to you. Same thing happens in the real world. As you become more and more conscious of this inner space you're learning to identify and occupy in like the real world scenarios of your day and your routine, the possibilities that often only sort of flutter as possibilities in your psyche become, sort of move in reach. And it's like, oh, instead of, just basic example, instead of eating the Snickers because I'm watching my weight or watching my diet, I'm going to pick a carrot. This depends on your relationship to these inner zones and your capacity to see above the landscape of the mind, which is a deeply habitual organ. So consider, use the mantra, Wahe Guru Nirvana, while you're cutting up your, whatever it is you're making for lunch, while you're doing anything at all, and it will provoke the meditative mind pretty quickly. And that's the beauty of using these Sanskrit terms, is they are purely connected to meditation, unless you speak Sanskrit in your day-to-day, which I doubt. So, unique spells, ultimately, Sanskrit. Wahe Guru Nirvana.